Hey, all, welcome to the G.I. Justin channel. I hope you're having an awesome Friday, getting ready for Memorial Day weekend, which is especially to veterans and the families of soldiers and veterans, a very, very important weekend on our calendar. And I hope you guys all have the opportunity to enjoy the time with your family and think about the soldiers that have made sacrifice for our nation, the highest sacrifice. You know, that's what Memorial Day is all about. So with that, I want to get into a couple of topics. We're going to have a little bit of the Free for All Friday again, get into some of the interesting ins and outs of what's going on right now. So, first couple things I want to talk with you about kind of gets back into a little bit of what we were talking about with Ukraine and Sound of Freedom flying over, a little helicopter action, huh? Nice. Uh, but so the first big thing I want to talk about when it comes to Ukraine today, it appears that there are some small groups of raiders who are invading Russian real estate and attacking across the border into Russia from Ukraine. And it turns out a lot of these groups are, in some cases, Russian citizens, apparently, who are frustrated and tired of this war. So the thing that's interesting about this is we are actually involved in it because we have to distance ourselves from these incursions, which basically Moscow is saying has led to the defeat of these insurgents who entered from Ukraine because they're using U.S.-made equipment. It turns out that Russia basically has released pictures of abandoned and damaged vehicles, which include Max Pros, which are some of our mine-resistant vehicles, and up-armored Humvees. That's kind of problematic. You know, you've got American equipment finding its way into Russia now, which is just another way to pull that knot a little bit tighter and bring us closer to, I think, the possibility of armed engagement with Russia, because they're getting pissed off, as well they should, that American equipment's being used to kill Russian soldiers and Russian people. Our State Department's come out insisting that they did not encourage or enable any of these attacks into Russia. The State Department spokesperson acknowledges that the pictures of on social media are 100% absolutely U.S. equipment, but they are skeptical about the truth behind this and saying, hey, it's up to Ukraine to decide how they want to fight the war and what they're going to do with their basically getting this equipment from us, but it's up to them as to how they choose to propagate this war. So villages in the area basically are coming under fire, and Russians are saying that 70 to 100 attackers basically have been attacked in Russia. You know, they're not even fighting in Ukraine. They're trying to kind of spread out the Russian military because, hey, if they've got to start thinking about defending Russia now, it's a pretty darn good way to do it. You know, give them, you know, sort of a second front, so to speak, that they have to deal with. So Ukraine basically denies involvement, and two Russian paramilitary groups that are opposed to what is going on say they're in charge of this, that it's a 100% Russian-led operation. Monday's raid, basically, Moscow called it an anti-terror operation by fighting back against these so-called basically anti-Russian, pro-Ukrainian Russians, who I think are probably along the spectrum of people who are getting tired of seeing Russian soldiers killed and Russian money spent losing a war that should have been over in days. It's interesting, you know, the governor of this region said a civilian was killed and several others were injured, but if you look at these pictures, it looks like a pretty healthy fight. I mean, these vehicles are riddled with bullet holes, and there's tons of spent shell casings all over the ground around these MRAPs and these up armored Humvees, and the vehicles on the sides of them have Fort Bakhmut, which is an area that is highly contested right now in Ukraine, and it's really interesting. So the claims haven't really been independently verified, but the BBC pretty much says that they're able to establish that some Russian businesses and some Russian buildings were hit in this attack. One of the interesting things on this same level is that basically the Russians are saying that they're Ukrainian terrorists, and then this group of Russians are coming out going, nah, man, it's us, we're Russians. So there's a lot of misinformation going back and forth in both directions, I think. Ukrainian officials are coming out saying hey, the attackers are Russian. They're known as the Liberty of Russia Legion and the Russian Volunteer Corps. These two groups have also come out on social media basically confirming that they're involved, saying, yeah, it's us. They want to create a demilitarized zone between Russia and Ukraine and force the Russians back, trying to put Russian artillery out of range of Ukrainian targets, I think. The thing that is problematic for NATO and for, I think, America is that these attacks on Russia and on Russian assets should make NATO a little bit nervous, because that kind of talks Russia into maybe we shouldn't be so confined. Part of this, I think, that plays into it too. So basically, the long-range weapons, the big-time, heavy artillery and multiple launch rocket systems that we're providing to them, still, they basically have a handshake deal between our government and Ukraine that says, hey, you can use them in defensive purposes to destroy Russian targets that are attacking Ukrainian targets, but they aren't to be used to attack within Russia. And that it kind of plays into, in my opinion, the reason it's like that is Russia is saying from the beginning that the reason why they've done this is to get some breathing room and take back Russian assets and Russian areas from Ukrainian control. Now, if Ukraine is attacking Russia, it kind of gives Russia that moral high ground, that moral standing to say, look, they're attacking our country. This is why we're here. Told you. And that's something that they can't have. This Russian narrative that their sovereignty is under attack, that's kind of the problem here. If you start seeing attacks into Russia, that validates their claims of, hey, we're a sovereign nation and we're being attacked by proxies of Ukraine, and we simply can't allow that. NATO needs to maintain that high ground and say, hey, sorry, obviously, the stuff we're giving them is for defensive purposes only. We are not arming them to attack Russia and get involved in that process. So another interesting little story coming along right now is it appears highly likely that we are going to start supplying the Ukrainians with American-made fighter jets. Again, another kind of signpost into, hey, we're in this with both feet at this point. We're making every attempt possible to help the Ukrainians fight off the Russians. The question becomes, we've talked at length about how our military is coming under a lot of pressure, both from within and without, when it comes to defending America. Are we really in a place that we should be supplying other countries with our aircraft when we may very well need them? I think that's a very big question as well that I think we have to answer. And that is, hey, are we just going to kick out more jets and hope they're enough? Or are we going to start looking to our own and handling the problems we see in America? So that moves us directly into the other Ukraine story, which is basically the head of the Wagner Group, who we've talked about at length, who kind of is at odds with Russia and Vladimir Putin, who actually is one of his friends, came out this week and basically warned that if Russia doesn't get off their butt and start doing something to win this war, they may face a revolt, a revolution, a coup, very akin to the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917. And coming from a guy who's got a significant amount of manpower at his disposal, that's problematic for them, I think. According to Reuters this week, in an interview that this guy posted, he said, there are tens of thousands of angry Russians who are sick and tired of seeing loved ones come home in coffins while the children of Moscow's elite just don't even care. And that's a big thing. He says the divide can end with a 1917 style revolution, where he's basically referencing a revolution that ended a dynasty, prompting all of these big, all the elites of Russia to be killed because everyone else was fighting in World War I. All the Russian masses are being killed in World War I while the elites of Russia are staying at home and living this opulent lifestyle. There's definitely some echoes there that sound pretty similar. So back to what Prosgrin says, first the soldiers will stand up, and after that their loved ones will rise up. There are already tens of thousands of them, such as relatives of those killed, and there are probably hundreds of thousands, and we cannot avoid that. He's been very critical of Russia and what's going on over there right now, based off this special military operation that is actually an invasion of Ukraine. And he's saying, he's said a bunch of times it's confusing and contradictory, and saying, hey, Russia's screwed up. And back to quoting him here, we're in such a condition that we could effing, using the F word, lose Russia. That is a main problem. We need to impose martial law and mobilize everyone we possibly can and get the economy toward either supporting the war or getting out of it. He's pointing out, back to what we were just talking about with this cross-border attack, that it's an indication that Ukraine is advancing and will not concede the territory that they're losing. He's been criticizing Moscow from the viewpoint that Russia will eventually have to achieve its war aims or get out of it and strike a peace deal. He's saying that, Kyiv is planning on fighting until they push the Ukrainian or the Russian forces all the way out, and this scenario will not be good for Russia, and they need to be prepared for what he called an arduous war. I think they've gotten to the point here with this where they've got to do something. Both of these stories together kind of tells you, hey, there's a good chance the Russian people are getting tired of seeing this, and now they're seeing attacks in Russia. What happens if you live in those border regions? You super happy to know that pro-Ukraine, anti-Putin Russians are basically becoming partisans and getting pissed off and attacking Russian military units? This is not a good look for them again. It doesn't look like this is a war that's going in any way, shape, or form the direction they want it to go. And I think that this guy's he's on track. I mean, he is a bad dude that has done some pretty rough things in the name of Russia across the world. And if you're Vladimir Putin, when you've got these hardcore zealots that are coming out who used to be, your corner man in the fight, saying, hey, we need to do something or this is going to end bad. I think he's got to take note of that. And I think his cabinet and the rest of the Kremlin needs to take note that, hey, things aren't going the way that we thought they would. Another thing to talk about today. So I did a story, and I'm going to link it up here in the top at the beginning of the video, about hypersonic missiles. And it turns out that the Ukrainians may have the kryptonite to these hypersonic missile problems. Story came out earlier in the week that they have shot down about 90% of the hypersonic missiles that the Russians have been sending their way this week, utilizing our Patriot missile system. That is intensely problematic for the Russians, because what they've been doing is staying in Russian territory and lofting these hypersonic missiles on their advanced platforms, their advanced jets, into Ukrainian airspace and attacking Ukraine, basically just to punish them. And their goal at this point is to punish them to the point that they no longer have the will to fight. If Ukraine is learning how to shoot all these things down, and you're not seeing these massive strikes on Ukraine anymore, coupled with Ukraine pushing Russia back in a lot of these places, I think there's a chance that you're going to see Ukraine start to make some tactical moves of their own, where they're going to start interdicting and hitting these rear line Russian units trying to come up to support the Russian advance. And as that happens, the more tactical wins that Ukraine can get, the more strategic wins they're going to start looking into and looking at piling up. So I think that is going to be the deal there, that Russia has to put more pressure on Ukraine in these other ways, and they need to do so soon, because you got all of these things coming together, like the Wagner Group pulling out of Bakhmut, the Wagner boss saying, hey, we're going to have a revolt on our hands if you don't do something. And now you got attacks that are happening in Russia that weren't happening previously. So all these things kind of come together, I think, to show that Russia's got to do something, and something epic, and do it quickly, or they're going to be in a position where they're going to have to find a way to make peace happen. And especially if you're Putin, who's holding on to command and control right now, how many more people have to come home in caskets, as this guy said, before people start getting aggravated? And I don't think the number's that big. So yeah, I think that they've got to do something, or Ukraine has to continue along the path that they're on right now, making the moves that they're making. So last big thing I want to talk with you guys about today, like I said earlier, Memorial Day has a very important place in my heart, and in that of most veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and post and pre those wars. Um, so the thing that I want to say is, take the opportunity this weekend more so than anything to enjoy yourself. Get out and have a good time, because I think I speak for all of my friends who are no longer with us when I say they would want their memories celebrated by doing the most America things you can do. Have barbecues, hang out with your friends, go to the beach if you can, do whatever it is that you can do to honor their memory by having a great weekend. So with that, I want to thank you guys for watching the channel. Thank you for liking and commenting. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do that. And if you are loving the channel and you've got friends who aren't subscribed, sign them up too, because I can use the help. So thank you guys so much for watching the channel, and have an awesome Memorial Day weekend.